I am not in the front office. I do not look at the situation, what they need or what they can do. And I'm being honest with you, I don't watch baseball. I play baseball. I do baseball when I'm working. I'm golf and I'm a Western guy. I swear to God, I don't do that because I think that if I get too involved, I'm the type of guy that I will go down and say something, and that's not a good thing.
Jim Rice absolutely despised facing 5 pitchers, and even decades later, he was still fighting the same battle over how baseball should be played. The Rice was sitting in a Red Sox clubhouse giving hitting advice to a young player. He was not just some old guy talking. He was the 1978 American League Most Valuable Player, a Hall of Fame hitter who had faced the hardest pitching of his time and survived it. I am Mason, and this is Baseball Icons. Then a team analytical staffer interrupted him. The staffer said Rice's advice did not match the organization's hitting approach. Rice asked a simple question: had this staffer ever played professional baseball? The answer was no. Rice looked at him and said, "Then you can't talk to me. Look at the monitor, do what you do, and don't talk to me." And before we return to the battles that shaped that old school view, use the hype feature and give this video some hype so more fans can discover these forgotten baseball stories. At first, you can understand where Rice was coming from. He had faced pitchers who threw at bodies, not just at strike zones. He had survived seasons where getting hit was part of the job. So when a young staffer with no playing background tried to correct him, of course he pushed back. But look closer, and this moment says more about Rice than it does about modern baseball. This was a man who never liked being told what to do. He treated the batter's box and even a clubhouse conversation as his own territory. Anyone who challenged that territory, whether it was a pitcher on the mound or a staffer with a laptop, was going to get the same sharp response. That pattern did not start in a clubhouse. It started on a baseball field years earlier against pitchers who used the inside part of the plate like a weapon. The 5 of those pitchers caused Rice more pain, more anger, and more trouble than any others. This is the story of those 5 men, and what facing each one revealed about Jim Rice. The Rice was not a small man swinging a light bat. He stood tall and strong, and when he connected with a fastball, the ball jumped off his bat in a way that scared pitchers all over the league. Coaches warned young pitchers before every game against Boston: do not miss your spot against Rice. The mistake pitch to him did not turn into a single, it turned into a home run that could land 3 rows deep into the stands. That kind of power gave Rice enormous confidence. He walked to the plate believing he could hurt any pitcher on any given night. The pitchers walked to the mound against him believing the same thing. That mutual belief, shared by both sides of every at-bat, is exactly what created such intense personal battles between Rice and a handful of pitchers who were willing to challenge him directly instead of tiptoeing around him. Before we get to them, we need to break down the story people usually tell about Rice. For years, fans and writers called him the most feared hitter in the American League. He earned that reputation during a stretch from 1977 through 1980 that few hitters have ever matched. In 1978, he piled up 406 total bases and won the Most Valuable Player award. Power like that does not come along often. But there is a problem with a fearsome reputation, and it has a name: Fenway Park. Fenway's left field wall sits close to home plate. For a strong right-handed pull hitter like Rice, that short distance turned long fly balls into home runs. The pitchers around the league knew it. At Fenway, they had to pitch carefully around that wall, and Rice punished any mistake. Away from Fenway, the story changed completely. On the road, Rice slugged 87 points lower than he did at home. He reached base 44 points less often. The pitchers away from Boston did not have to respect that short wall, so they attacked him differently. They came up and in with hard fastballs, then spun sharp breaking balls away from his bat. The Rice's aggressive swing, so dangerous at Fenway, became a weakness on the road. It helps to picture 2 very different versions of the same hitter. At Fenway, Rice steps into the box with total confidence, knowing that even a mistimed swing pulled foul down the line has a chance to sneak just inside that short wall for a home run. On the road in a ballpark with normal dimensions, that same swing produces a routine fly ball out. The bat speed and the swing itself never changed. Only the building around him did. That single difference explains an enormous amount about why certain pitchers found so much more success against Rice once they got him away from Boston. To really understand how much Fenway shaped Rice's legend, compare him to his own teammate, Fred Lynn. The two were called the Gold Dust Twins, arriving in Boston together and playing side by side for years. Before we look at the numbers, here's a quick, simple explanation of what each one means. On-base percentage measures how often a hitter reaches base safely, whether through a hit, a walk, or getting struck by a pitch. The slugging percentage measures raw power, giving extra credit for doubles, triples, and home runs instead of treating every hit the same. And wins above replacement tries to combine hitting, fielding, and base running into one single number, estimating how many extra wins a player is worth compared to an average bench player. Lynn got on base more often across his career, with an on-base percentage of 360 compared to Rice's 352. The Lynn also walked far more, taking 857 free passes to Rice's 670. The Rice struck out 1,423 times. Lynn struck out only 1,116 times. The gap grows even wider when you look at double plays. The Rice grounded into 315 double plays over his career. Lynn grounded into only 149. Lynn also won 4 Gold Glove awards for his defense in center field. The Rice won 0. When you add up all these numbers using wins above replacement, a stat that tries to measure total value, Lynn finishes with 49.9 wins above replacement. The Rice finishes with 47.2. None of this means Rice was not a great power hitter. He led Lynn in home runs, 382 to 306, and in slugging percentage as well. But it does mean the story of Rice as the single most complete and most feared hitter of his time is not the full picture. Much of his reputation came from one very friendly ballpark. Think of it this way. Imagine 2 students take the same math test, but one student gets extra time and the other does not. The student with extra time might score higher, but that higher score does not prove they understand the material better. Way Park worked a little like that extra time for Rice. It gave him an advantage that had nothing to do with his raw skill as a hitter. And that advantage inflated his reputation far beyond what his complete body of work actually showed. This does not erase what Rice accomplished. He still hit for real power, and he still handled fastballs better than almost anyone of his generation when the pitch caught too much of the plate. But it does mean that opposing pitchers, especially on the road, found real exploitable weaknesses in his game. And the pitchers who found those weaknesses most often became the ones Rice grew to despise the most. This gap between the myth and the numbers matters because it explains exactly how smart pitchers beat Rice. They built a simple plan. First, they threw hard and tight to make Rice flinch or protect himself. Then they moved the next pitch away or down, tempting his aggressive swing into chasing something outside the strike zone. That combination produced strikeouts, weak ground balls, and a shocking number of double plays. This formula did not appear once or twice by accident. It became a repeated blueprint used by pitcher after pitcher across an entire era. And the 5 men on this list were the ones who executed that blueprint most effectively against him. The Rice's anger toward pitchers who worked him inside did not start as some abstract baseball theory. It started with a single pitch that broke his wrist and changed the direction of his career. That story sets up everything that follows. So let's count down the 5 men who gave Jim Rice the most trouble and see what each one exposed about the man at the plate. Number 5, Rich Gossage, known to everyone as Goose. The rivalry between Boston and New York during this era was not just about 2 teams competing for a division title. It was personal, loud, and often bitter, with both fan bases treating every game like a small war. Players carried that same tension onto the field, and few pitchers embodied the Yankees' side of that war more completely than Gossage. Nobody on this list represents pure fear the way Goose Gossage does. Gossage anchored the Yankees bullpen during the height of the Red Sox and Yankees rivalry in the late 1970s. He threw close to 100 miles an hour, and he was not shy about pitching inside. Hitters across the league feared stepping into the batter's box against him in a close game. Gossage pitching was a physical confrontation. He believed the inside part of the plate belonged to the pitcher, and he was willing to use his fastball to prove it. To Rice, hitting meant owning his ground and never backing down from anyone. Put those 2 mindsets together in a tight game between hated rivals, and you get one of the most intense standoffs in baseball history. Gossage represented everything Rice hated about the Yankees teams of that era. A group known for its brash, aggressive style, sometimes called the Bronx Zoo. The Rice resented how often Yankees pitchers used pitches near a hitter's head to break his focus and disrupt his timing. Facing Gossage meant facing that entire philosophy in its purest form. Think about what it actually felt like to stand in against him. The fastball came in near triple digits. The threat of an inside pitch was always real. The history between the 2 teams added extra anger to every pitch. The situation was usually late in a big game when every pitch mattered. The backing off, even slightly, felt like giving up ground Rice was not willing to give. But refusing to move also gave him less time to react to a pitch that could seriously hurt him. Picture the scene from the stands. The stadium is loud, packed with fans from both sides, screaming with every pitch. Gossage stares in from the mound, his sleeves rolled up, his mustache twitching as he grips the ball. The Rice digs his back foot into the dirt of the batter's box, refusing to give an inch of ground. Neither man says a word, but the tension between them is easy to feel even from far away. That kind of silent standoff, repeated year after year, is what made this rivalry so unforgettable to the people who watched it happen live. That is the trap Rice's pride built for himself. He believed real courage meant never surrendering an inch of the batter's box, even when a smarter, safer adjustment might have served him better in the long run. The facing Gossage tested that belief pitch after pitch, and Rice refused to fail that test, no matter what it cost him physically or mentally. Here's the twist that makes this rivalry so memorable. Years after both men retired, at Rice's Hall of Fame induction, Gossage said something that surprised a lot of people. He said Rice was as close as he ever came to being scared while standing on the mound. Think about that for a moment. One of the most intimidating relief pitchers in baseball history admitted that Jim Rice made him nervous. That single sentence does not erase years of hostility between them. It does something more interesting. It shows that the fear Rice inspired at the plate was not one-directional. While Rice feared getting hurt by Gossage's fastball, Gossage feared what Rice's bat could do if he made a mistake. Two proud, stubborn competitors, each one a little bit afraid of the other, and neither one willing to admit it during their playing days. That kind of mutual respect earned through real danger is rare in sports, and it is exactly why Gossage sits at number 5 on this list. He gave Rice his most physically intense battles, and in the end, he gave Rice something even more valuable, proof that even the most feared closer in the game had to take him seriously. Think about how rare that kind of admission really is in professional sports. The athletes at that level are trained to project confidence at all times, especially toward rivals from a hated division. For Gossage to openly admit fear, even years after retirement, tells you just how real this rivalry actually was. It was never manufactured for TV or exaggerated by reporters looking for a good story. It was two proud, physical competitors who genuinely unsettled each other every single time they met on the field. Number 4. Dave Righetti. Righetti arrived in the major leagues as a promising young left-hander for a Yankees team that always seemed to have talent pouring in from every direction. Boston fans and players alike knew that facing New York meant facing a steady stream of dangerous arms, and Righetti quickly proved he belonged among the most dangerous of them all. The Rice built his legend-crushing fastballs from right-handed pitchers, but left-handed pitchers with real velocity gave him a different kind of trouble. The good left-hander could jam him with a fastball inside, then follow it with a slider that swept sharply away from his bat. The Rice's aggressive, pull-heavy swing made him vulnerable to chasing that pitch out of the strike zone. The few left-handers exploited this better than Yankees pitcher Dave Righetti. The signature moment between them came on July 4th, 1983. The Righetti took the mound against a Boston lineup that included Wade Boggs, Dwight Evans, and Jim Rice, 3 dangerous hitters by any standard. By the end of the game, Righetti had thrown a no-hitter, needing 132 pitches to shut down the entire Red Sox offense. Afterward, the 22-year-old Righetti admitted to reporters that he had a little anger involved that day, and he had aimed that anger directly at dismantling the Boston lineup. For a rival pitcher to say he pitched with anger against your team and then back it up with a no-hitter tells you everything about how personal this rivalry felt. The Righetti represented a different kind of threat than the pitchers before him on this list. He did not need to hit Rice or threaten him physically. He beat Rice with patience, movement, and control, exposing the very edges of Rice's aggressive approach. Where earlier pitchers created danger or open conflict, Righetti created quiet humiliation, the kind that comes from being outsmarted rather than overpowered. This connects directly back to Rice's home and road splits. Away from the friendly wall at Fenway Park, an elite pitcher like Righetti did not have to fear the short porch in left field. He could work the whole strike zone with more confidence, sliding pitches further and further from the plate. Daring Rice's aggressive instincts to take over, the Rice's power never disappeared, but the conditions shifted, and pitchers like Righetti knew exactly how to use that shift. Think about how a left-handed pitcher sets up a right-handed hitter like Rice. The fastball comes in on the hands, forcing the hitter to decide in a split second whether to swing or protect himself. Just as the hitter adjusts to expect another pitch inside, the slider arrives instead, breaking sharply toward the outside corner. The hitter who commits early, the way Rice often did, ends up swinging at a pitch that is no longer anywhere near the strike zone. It looks like a mistake by the hitter, but really it is a trap set carefully by the pitcher. No-hitters are rare in baseball, and being part of one is never something a player wants attached to his name, no matter how good his career turns out to be. For Rice, Sharing a lineup with Boggs and Evans that day made the no-hitter sting even more. Three dangerous hitters completely shut down on a night Righetti clearly wanted to prove a point against Boston. For a hitter who wanted every battle to come down to raw strength and courage, Righetti offered a much more frustrating kind of challenge. He turned at-bats into a test of patience and recognition, areas where Rice was far less complete than he was in pure power. That is a hard truth for a proud hitter to accept, and it is exactly why Righetti earns his place on this list at number 4. There is a kind of frustration in sports that comes from being beaten by superior effort or strength, and a different kind that comes from being outthought. The Rice had built his entire career on the first kind, refusing to yield ground physically to anyone. The Righetti forced him to confront the second kind instead, and that mental defeat may have bothered Rice more than any single loss ever could. The number 3, Dennis Martinez. The Orioles under-manager Earl Weaver built their success on strong pitching and fundamentally sound baseball, and Martinez was one of the young arms expected to carry that tradition forward. Nobody doubted his talent. The question, especially early in his career, was whether he could control his power well enough to avoid disaster. During the late 1970s, the Baltimore Orioles and the Boston Red Sox fought hard for control of the American League East. The Orioles' right-hander Dennis Martinez became one of the most talented and most dangerous pitchers in that rivalry. Martinez threw hard, and he was known for pitching inside without much hesitation, sometimes with reckless force. The most alarming example came on June 21, 1977 in Baltimore. Martinez hit Red Sox first baseman George Scott, known to teammates as Boomer, with a pitch. Then he threw near Scott's head again on a following pitch. The Scott had seen enough. He charged the mound after Martinez, who ran away rather than face him directly. The Rice was not the batter in that moment, but he was standing in the middle of that same dangerous Red Sox lineup, hitting alongside Scott, Carl Yastrzemski, and Carlton Fisk. Watching a teammate get thrown at twice in one at-bat sent a clear message to every hitter in that lineup, including Rice. Martinez's fastball inside was not just a tactic. It was a genuine danger to anyone standing in the batter's box that day. The Rice drew a clear line in his own mind between pitchers who worked inside as a tactic and pitchers who crossed into reckless danger. He understood and even respected pitchers willing to challenge him close to his hands. What he could not accept was a pitcher who lost control near a hitter's head, where one mistake could end a career or worse. Baseball has always had unwritten rules about this exact line. A pitch that jams a hitter's hands is considered fair, even smart, because it is aimed at a part of the body far from anything vital. A pitch that sails up near a hitter's head is treated completely differently, because the danger is far more serious. Martinez, at least on that afternoon in Baltimore, blurred that line in a way that alarmed everyone watching, including hitters on his own bench. That distinction shaped how Rice approached at-bats against Martinez. Facing a pitcher capable of that kind of danger forced Rice to think about self-protection first and full-plate coverage second. For an aggressive hitter who wanted total command of the strike zone, being forced into a defensive mindset by fear of injury was its own kind of defeat, even before a single pitch crossed the plate. This is why Martinez sits above Righetti and Gossage on some level of pure dread, even though the numbers and highlight reels favor other names. Martinez represented physical danger that had nothing to do with skill or strategy. It was about survival. And for a hitter as proud and fearless as Rice, being made to feel physically unsafe, even briefly, left a mark that lasted far longer than any single strikeout or ground ball. Fear like that does not fade quickly. Long after the incident with Scott Red Sox hitters stepping in against Martinez likely carried a small, quiet awareness in the back of their minds, the wondering whether this would be another routine at bat or another moment where things could suddenly turn dangerous. That kind of lingering uncertainty is exactly the sort of mental burden Rice despised carrying to the plate. Number 2, Bo McLaughlin. Reese had a well-earned reputation across the league as a hitter who would not be pushed around. The pitchers on other teams talked about him in the same breath as some of the most stubborn, territorial hitters in the game. That reputation is exactly what made his confrontation with McLaughlin so explosive once it finally happened in front of a national audience. If Martinez represented quiet, simmering danger, Bo McLaughlin represented open, public hostility. On May 22, 1982, the Red Sox hosted the Oakland Athletics at Fenway Park, and the game was broadcast nationally on NBC's Game of the Week. Boston starter Bob Ojeda had been knocked out early in the first inning, and McLaughlin came on in relief for Oakland. The McLaughlin used an aggressive sequence of inside pitches to push Rice away from the plate. The Rice took enormous pride in standing his ground against pitchers who tried brushback tactics, and he saw McLaughlin's approach as exactly that kind of tactic. Instead of backing down, Rice pushed back and the confrontation escalated quickly in front of a national TV audience. What followed was a long, heated verbal argument on the field. The Rice was involved along with McLaughlin himself, Oakland catcher Mike Heath, and home plate umpire Russ Getz. Nobody threw a punch, but the anger on display was obvious to anyone watching at home. This was not a quiet disagreement. It was raw frustration boiling over in real time, captured for the whole country to see. Picture the scene. Players from both dugouts lean over the railing, watching closely. The umpire steps between Rice and McLaughlin, trying to calm two men who clearly do not want to be calmed down. Fans in the stands rise to their feet, unsure whether they are about to see a real fight break out. Cameras zoom in, catching every angry gesture, every pointed finger, every word that neither man was willing to take back. For a national TV audience unfamiliar with the day-to-day tension of the American League, this was their introduction to just how personal these battles could become. For Rice, the issue was not just the pitch itself, it was what the pitch represented. He believed brushback pitches should be earned, thrown by pitchers who had proven their dominance and their control. He saw McLaughlin's version as a cheap shortcut, a way to intimidate hitters without actually beating them with real stuff. That distinction mattered enormously to Rice's sense of respect on the field. The A brushback pitch, in simple terms, is a pitch thrown close enough to a hitter to make him step back or duck, without actually trying to hit him. The established stars with dominant fastballs sometimes use this pitch to remind hitters not to crowd the plate too comfortably. Rice did not mind facing that tactic from a pitcher who had truly earned the right to use it through years of proven results. What angered him was facing the same tactic from a pitcher he did not view as being in that same elite class. But here's where the negative side of this story shows itself clearly. The moment Rice let his anger take over, he handed some of the mental battle to McLaughlin. Instead of thinking purely about pitch location and timing, Rice was now thinking about respect, territory, and retaliation. The A hitter, distracted by anger, is not a hitter thinking clearly about the next pitch. And that shift in focus could only help the pitcher on the mound. This nationally televised blow-up showed the world something that teammates and opposing players already knew. The Rice's temper was real, and it could be triggered. The McLaughlin did not need years of history or a career-defining fastball to get under Rice's skin. He just needed one aggressive sequence, and the willingness to stand his ground when Rice pushed back. That is a valuable lesson other pitchers around the league likely noticed after watching that broadcast. The Rice's power and pride made him dangerous at the plate, but that same pride also made him predictable in a different way. The A pitcher, confident enough to challenge him directly without flinching, could pull Rice into exactly the kind of emotional confrontation that clouded his focus on the very next pitch. Number 1, Vern Rule. Every rivalry on this list grew out of pride, temper, or tactical frustration. This one grew out of pure physical pain, and it may be the most painful story in Rice's entire career. Rulo was a young Detroit Tigers pitcher, not a headline name across the league, which makes what happened between him and Rice even harder to predict looking back with everything we now know. It happened on September 21st, 1975, during a late-season matchup against the Detroit Tigers. Rice was in the middle of a spectacular rookie season. He was hitting .309, with 22 home runs and 102 runs batted in, numbers that marked him as one of the best young hitters in the game. Then Tigers pitcher Vern Rule threw a high, tight fastball that struck Rice directly on the left hand. The pitch fractured his wrist and ended his season instantly. The timing could not have been worse. The injury forced Rice to miss the entire 1975 postseason. Without their young power hitter in the lineup, the Red Sox reached the World Series anyway, but they lost a legendary 7-game battle to the Cincinnati Reds. Nobody can say for certain that Rice's presence would have changed the outcome, but it remains one of the most painful what-if questions in the history of the franchise. Think about how quickly everything changed for Rice that day. One moment he was in the middle of a breakout rookie season, hitting well over .300 with real power numbers, a young player who seemed destined to be part of a World Series run. The very next moment, one fastball later, his season was completely over. He did not get to choose when his year ended. The single pitch, thrown in a fraction of a second, made that decision for him. For a young player having the best season of his life, this was not just a physical injury. It stole away his chance to play on the biggest stage in baseball at the exact moment his career was taking off. There is nothing in the research to suggest Rule meant to hurt him on purpose. The high and tight fastballs were simply part of the game in that era. But intent did not matter to Rice. The result was the same either way, a broken wrist and a lost World Series chance. This single pitch explains why inside fastballs became so emotionally loaded for Rice for the rest of his career. The pitcher who missed his spot near the hands was not just risking a walk or a hit by pitch. he was risking a player's entire season, and in Rice's case, his one shot at that particular World Series. From that day forward, Rice refused to give ground against inside pitching, no matter who was on the mound or what the situation called for. That refusal made him brave. It also made him more likely to end up in tense, angry confrontations later in his career. The kind we just walked through with McLaughlin, Martinez, Righetti, and Gossage. Every one of those battles traces back, at least in part, to this single afternoon against Vern Rule, when one pitch changed how Jim Rice would see every inside fastball for the rest of his playing days. It is a strange kind of legacy for a pitcher to leave behind. Rule likely did not think twice about that particular fastball on the day he threw it. The pitchers hit batters inside all the time in that era, and most such moments are forgotten within a season. But for Rice, that one pitch became the emotional foundation for an entire career's worth of tension against pitchers willing to work him inside. Now let's step back and look at the full picture these 5 pitchers created together. The Rice was, by nature, a high-aggression, low-walk hitter. His career walk rate sat around only 5%. He struck out 1,423 times while walking only 670 times. The smart pitchers figured out quickly that they did not need to throw strikes to beat him. They just needed to expand the strike zone and let his aggressive instincts do the rest. That approach had one very specific consequence. Double plays. The double play happens when a hitter grounds the ball to an infielder in a way that allows the defense to get 2 outs on a single play, usually erasing a runner on base and the batter at the same time. For a power hitter who wants to drive in runs, a double play can undo an entire rally in one swing. In 1984, Rice set a major league single-season record by grounding into 36 double plays. By 1988, he had passed Brooks Robinson for the American League career record among right-handed hitters. The pattern was simple and repeatable. The high, tight fastball changed his eye level and pushed him back off the plate. Then a low, sinking pitch or slider produced a ground ball perfectly placed to end an inning. This was not bad luck repeating itself over and over. It was a direct result of how Rice approached hitting. His aggressive, pull-heavy swing generated tremendous power when he connected cleanly, but it also produced hard ground balls whenever a pitcher successfully lowered his eye level first. The pitchers across the league eventually built entire game plans around this single tendency because it worked so reliably against him. As Rice aged, this vulnerability only grew worse. His hand-eye coordination declined sharply, made worse by failing contact lenses, worsening eyesight, and injuries to his knees and elbow. By 1989, his batting average had fallen all the way to 234. He hit only 3 home runs and drove in 28 runs across just 56 games, numbers that would have been unthinkable during his peak seasons. It is worth remembering just how far this fall really was. Only a few years earlier, Rice had been one of the most feared power hitters in baseball, a player-pitcher's game planned around and fans lined up to watch. Watching that same player struggle to catch up to fastballs he once crushed with ease was difficult for everyone who had followed his career, including Rice himself. That decline led to an ugly final chapter. The Red Sox manager Joe Morgan sent Spike Owen up to pinch hit for Rice in a game. The Rice became furious and shoved his own manager in response. The team suspended him, and he was released at the end of the season. It was a sad ending for a player who had once terrorized American League pitching, but it fit a lifelong pattern. The Rice had spent his whole career refusing to accept that anyone else could take control of his space, whether that space was the batter's box or his spot in the lineup. That same refusal followed him into his life after baseball. Remember the spring training moment we opened with, when an analytical staffer challenged his hitting advice? Rice believes modern pitchers, sometimes calling them throwers rather than pitchers, lack the stamina and skill of the complete game artists from his own era. Modern coaches trust data, launch angle, and exit velocity. Rice trusts line drives, hard-earned experience, and adjusting one pitch at a time. Each side is convinced the other side is missing something essential about the game. Think about what each side is actually protecting when they argue this way. The analytics side wants decisions built on numbers that can be measured and tested, because numbers do not get tired, do not carry grudges, and do not care whose feelings get hurt along the way. The Rice's side wants decisions built on lived experience, the kind that comes only from standing in against a pitcher who is genuinely trying to get you out by any means necessary, including fear. Neither approach is foolish. They are simply built on different kinds of proof, one drawn from data and one drawn from scars. That clash is exactly why the spring training moment we opened with still resonates. It was not really about one player and one staffer. It was 2 entire generations of baseball thinking, meeting face-to-face in a clubhouse, neither one willing to back down. It is worth pausing here to think about why this argument still matters so many years after Rice retired. Baseball has changed enormously since his playing days. Teams now use cameras, computers, and detailed data to make decisions that used to rely purely on a coach's gut feeling. Some of that change has clearly helped players get better and stay healthier, but fought pitch by pitch, season after season between men who each refused to be the one who blinked first. There is something almost old-fashioned about rivalries built this way. The modern baseball, with its constant roster turnover and heavy reliance on matchup data, rarely produces the kind of sustained personal tension that defined Rice's battles with these five men. Back then, players saw the same opponents again and again, year after year, and grudges had time to build, deepen, and occasionally explode into the open, the way they did on that Fenway Park afternoon against Bo McLaughlin. Rice never publicly ranked these five men in order, and he never released some official list of his most hated opponents. What we have instead is a body of evidence built from injuries, confrontations, statistics, and one late career quote from a rival who feared him more than almost anyone else in the league. The put together, that evidence tells a clear story about a proud, aggressive hitter who never once gave an inch he did not have to. Some of them hurt him, some of them angered him, some of them made him look ordinary, at least for a moment. But when a hard fastball came in near his head and an entire stadium waited to see if he would step back, Jim Rice kept his feet planted in the dirt. That is exactly why, years later, even Goose Gossage could admit that facing Jim Rice made him feel something close to fear.